If you want more conventional wisdom on management, this podcast isn't for you. Throw away your so-called accountability. Throw away those 80s cliches. This is the On Purpose Management Podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the On Purpose Growth Breakthrough Sales Podcast. And today I have one of the tougher topics that I think we'll be covering. And it's a hard one because it just happened to me, and in sales it happens to everybody, and that's when you lose. And let me define lose. It is when you think you have a qualified prospect in front of you, you do a presentation, you go through the whole 9 yards, you send the presentation, and you've probably even already spent your commission check or the money coming in, and a week later, 2 weeks later, whenever it is, you get the note back saying they went with another provider, another vendor, a different choice. And it stings, it hurts, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're going to talk about a few things. And first and foremost, sales is not a perfect science. There is no do this, then that. There is no guarantee. There is no 1 + 1 = 2. You can do everything right and still lose. And in a lot of cases, a lot of times, you're going to do everything right and still lose. The question becomes, what are you going to do about it, and what actions are you going to take? And first and foremost, yes, you want to get the feedback. You want to understand what happens, and you want to dig in and get to the picture of this is where we went wrong. And so I want to cover that a little bit, because invariably what happens is when people get that feedback, they want to take direct, dramatic action against whatever feedback they heard. And a lot of times the feedback they hear isn't honest, it isn't true. Many times when people go with somebody else, they give you the easiest feedback to spare your feelings. And they give you reasons that aren't necessarily there. So if you're going to collect feedback, if you're going to go through that process, you have to become good at getting on the phone, talking with the person, and making sure the person knows that it's okay to be honest and it's okay to be open and just tell the truth about what happened. Second, when you get to the feedback, you have to measure it against cases you've won and situations where you've won and other situations where you've lost. And you want to put it in a bucket with all of the other feedback you're getting. And why is this so important? Why not take action on the things that you've learned? And the thing about sales is because it isn't a 1-to-1, do this, get that. It's a probability game. And if you run the same play 100 times, if you have a great presentation 100 times, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. And the idea is that you're creating a sales process, a buyer's journey, a presentation, a proposal to win as many of those as possible. But there isn't a formula to win them all. There isn't a product or service that's going to win them all. So when you get this feedback, you want to put it in the bucket of all of the other data and make sure you're course correcting to improve the probability of closing, not to close that specific case or those specific instances. So when you look at what happened in that specific case, you want to understand how often that has happened to you, as well as how often it's going to continue to happen, how many buyers are like that, how many of your prospects fit into that category. And you want to compare that to how many of them don't and how many aren't in that category. And maybe the answer is okay, we know that we keep running into this objection with this set of people. Let's stop targeting those people. Or maybe it is one of those cases, shit, that's happening to a lot of people. That's a common feedback. Now we have to take a step back and adjust to increase our probability of wins. Maybe this adjustment doesn't impact anybody else, just this group, and that it becomes a no-brainer. The moral here is, the point of this is that you want to do course corrections that increase probability of the whole, not of the individual case. Now, one of the things that your sales process has to have, and these individual cases should highlight that, is the ability to handle variation. You don't want to create a presentation for an average client, because there's no such thing as an average client. Everyone's different. So your sales process, your presentation, your proposal has to be able to handle that variation. And you have to start measuring earlier in your sales process and the buyer's journey how to manage that variation going downstream. So it's very important that when you get this feedback, you're very mindful on what the feedback means, on what it doesn't mean, and the adjustments that you can take from it. Now, with all of that said, that's the technical aspect. That's the improvement aspect. The other thing that you have to do is when somebody says no, after you've done your analysis and after that you've done your feedback loop and you do your calculations on what you're going to change, you have to move on. The most important thing that's you can do is not let a negative outcome impact the next outcome. Not let it impact your mood, not let it impact your work ethic, not let it impact your motivation to do what has to be done going forward. Now, a lot of people would say it should motivate you more and you should do more because of it. Well, because you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're doing all of the right activities and all of the right things already, and that what we're trying to do is just not adjust because of the negative. It's going to happen. You should expect it to happen. And when it does, just get back to the grind. Just get back to doing what you know is successful. One of the things that I've learned in baseball from my father is the idea of don't let the first error create a second error. So the metaphor comes in, you're playing shortstop, you go to field the ground ball, and you mishandle the ground ball. Don't pick it up and make a quick rush throw so that you throw it out of play or you throw it down the line where they get extra bases. Give them the first base, stop the bleeding, and move on and make the next play. And that's so important in sales that when you have a negative phone call, you have some type of system, some type of strategy that allows you to have it not bleed over. And I'm going to give you a couple examples that you can use for that. First and foremost, what I do when negative impact comes in is the first thing I do is look for feedback. I take that feedback and decide whether I'm going to adjust or not. And a lot of times I can't make that decision on the spot. But I make a conscious and mental choice to write this down and put it in what I call a parking lot so that I know I'm going to get back to it. That information's not going to be wasted or lost. And I'm going to use it. And then what I do is I do at least one thing I absolutely hate, and generally that's pick up the phone and I do 5 cold calls. And those generally suck too, and they're hard, and maybe I go 0 for 5. But the idea that I'm working on is that mentally what happens is I get to discipline. I take action to prove that I'm going to do what it takes. And that discipline is what sets me free and resets my mind. If you don't have time for that, maybe you spend 2 minutes and you meditate. Maybe another good one I heard, one of my colleagues, what they do is when something negative comes in, they write down 3 things they're grateful for or 3 things that have meant something in their life. These are all strategies to reset. Think of it as a wine and cheese tasting, that when you taste the first wine and the first cheese, what you do is you drink a little water between going for the next wine and cheese to clear your palate. And that's what you need to do with negative outcomes or negative feedback or anything that happens in your life that could leak over to the next thing. Find a way to clear your palate, clear that mind. So the activity that you can take right now, the activity that you can do is when you get negative feedback, create a plan, create a strategy that allows you to first learn from that negative outcome so that you don't keep having negative outcomes, and have a strategy that says, do we make a change or not make a change based on probability of closing the next deal? And then also take the action of creating a strategy that gives you a way to clear your palate, to clear your mind so that the first error or the first mistake or the first negative outcome doesn't create more and doesn't create another error or mistake or negative outcome. So come up with the strategy, a tactic, a plan, whatever you want to call it. Come up with a tool that you can use to quickly reset your mind and reframe your mind so you can get back to doing what you know works. Thanks, and we look forward to hearing you, to seeing you and having you listen to us again. Come back and join us. And oh, by the way, if you like this stuff, don't be afraid to share it. Tell 3, tell 5, tell 10 people to come in and listen to us. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the OnPurpose Growth podcast. Let us know what you thought in the comment section. For more from OnPurpose Growth, go to onpurposegrowth.com. Subscribe here at BLTV for all of our content, including the daily Learn About Law podcast, Seize Your Business, Making Real Estate Fun, and Logical Logistics podcast, brought to you by O'Flaherty Law. Thanks for listening.